I inadvertently stepped into a zombie apocalypse discussion. The argument essentially was that slow moving zombies could never topple a civilization, modern one especially. So, zombies are a bit past their prime in our culture in terms of being the hot item. So, how is it I'm talking about it here? Well, what had happened is my son had recommended a game. I should play a game called Project Zomboid. And it's a solid little survival game. And the final tagline before you start is, "This is how you died." And the little scene next to me is kind of typical what happens, somewhere between 2 to 10 days into the game. uh, the game ultimately involves a lot of crafting like actions where you're building things, finding things, putting things together, and obviously the survival encounters are difficult. So this led to me searching for a bunch of information from a very thriving and active support community that ended up with all things zombie ending up in my feeds. So therefore, I started seeing commentary on TV shows uh, that are not as popular as they once been, but people are still talking about them. And the general consensus was that, uh, in this case, talking about The Walking Dead, that those zombies could never have toppled the civilization they did. Now, I do think a zombie apocalypse is pretty much an impossible event. I think maybe The Last of Us, the whole fungus thing, is probably the most plausible case for something like that happening, but I don't see anything like that ever really happening. So when I talk about how this might go down, it's not that I think it could happen. However, there are elements of this that do mirror civil unrest and plagues that have high mortality rates. So there are lessons that could be taken from this that are useful. I would guess that people who think a slow moving zombie outbreak would be easy to beat are probably unfamiliar with actual firearms use. They're also don't really understand how first responders work, i.e., they've seen both of these in the movies and think they know how it happens. And I don't think they really know how government really works, and they don't know about general statistics. Now, the world in the video I was commenting on and getting some pushback on was noted in the Walking Dead world. First, understand that that world has no zombie lore. Um, there is no idea that allows people to recognize what is happening or how to fix it, other than trial and error. Or, in other words, Romero doesn't exist in their world. So they've never seen a zombie apocalypse depicted where they rapidly pick up on, oh, I think, could this be? And even that. But second, in The Walking Dead, everybody's already infected. It's a latent virus in everybody at this point. So everybody who dies rises as a zombie no matter how they die. They die fairly quickly. If bitten, people then will die within a few days of an infection. So let's talk about the fun stuff statistics. In New York City alone, approximately 20 people die per hour of all causes. Six of these will be in a hospital, four of these will be in a long term care facility. So let's picture six people dying in 1 hour in a hospital. Some of these will happen in different hospitals within the same hour. A person dies. Just pick just one. We're starting with one. Medical personnel and possibly family are present. Reanimation typically takes place in under 10 minutes, sometimes as short as 2 to 3 minutes, occasionally as long as an hour, depending on how the plot demands. All of a sudden, this person reanimates who they believed was dead. Now, this is something new to them. And even if they did have lore, they're not going to jump to the conclusion it's a zombie. Everyone is going to assume that the person they just thought was dead is now alive and somehow revived. That does happen. Zombies don't. People will rush to get in close proximity, maybe family members to provide affection, or definitely hospital workers to get vitals from the person and possibly try to lay them back down and make sure that they're not going to strain themselves and have another heart attack or whatever took them out. Nobody is going to be on guard for an attack. It's almost a 100% certainty in that situation somebody's going to get bitten. There's a high likelihood of multiple people getting bitten at once, especially when they attempt to restrain what they think is an irrational patient. If they are incapable of restraining the zombie, more orderlies and possibly security will arrive. If anyone is bit in a critical location, or basically a spot where blood really gushes out, like a femoral artery or a neck artery or something like that, they may die suddenly and add to the problem within a few minutes. Now, when somebody starts moving around and they're doing it in an irrational manner, especially in a hospital, the rational reaction will be ultimately to try to restrain the person, the process of which will cause numerous people to get bit. Nobody will consider restraining any of the newly dead or bitten. So if somebody dies or someone gets bitten, they're going to say, "Hey, we better tie these down, all these people down based on what we just saw." People won't arrive at that conclusion, even if you did have zombie lore in your culture. These people don't. So this scene, the one I just went through, is now repeating at 6 different hospital locations within the same hour, some of which may be in the same hospital. Now, a quick alternate hospital possibility to that scenario: a death is missed. Maybe the machine goes beep and it's been going beep all day long because someone keeps pulling their uh, leads off or something like that. And there may not be an initial panic reaction. And you could have an issue where a death gets missed and a zombie begins wandering from room to room. Or in another alternate scenario where uh, they're not expecting someone to be dead. So the first responder in the hospital that arrives is just by themselves, is overpowered, killed, and rises before even more people show up. Then there are two zombies to deal with in that area. Now, at the same time all this is happening, poor people die in a long-term care facility, like old person's home or rest home or retirement home, depending on how you use it in your part of the country. These areas are not really all that actively monitored. Usually during quiet times, during the various periods of the evening and such, uh, it's not like people are constantly roaming around keeping an eye on what's going on. In this situation, you're likely to have a person die, reanimate, and then take a walk to the next room, kill the occupant, and move on. Or they might end up storming a community area where most of the other residents are weak, slow, or immobilized. At this same time, in addition to 6 in the hospital and 4 in a long term care facility, and by the way, that's just statistics, it could be more, it could be less. At the same time, these other things are happening. In the same hour, 10 other people are going to die. Maybe they're at work, at some office where weapons aren't allowed and the cubicles are packed close together. Some might be at home, in a house, waiting for the family to come home, or reacting to movement outside and crashing through a window. Some are in apartments, pounding on their doors and walls. This all happens in 1 hour. Police suddenly get really busy. So, police show up to find a crazed person not following orders. Police are yelling at them, they're not reacting, and maybe they're coming at them and they're yelling, "Hey, don't come at us." Odds are the zombie's not armed in any way, especially if they're like wearing a hospital gown and both just reaching out for the police. there's a high order probability that the police will attempt to physically subdue that person. Tasing's going to have no effect. There's a high likelihood that 1 to 2 cops get bit in each one of these scenarios. And again, possibly one of them's a quickly fatal wound. So, what'll end up happening in each one of these situations is restrained zombies thrashing around, people dying from injuries getting attacked by a zombie, and injured cops are going to be rushed to the hospitals, the same hospitals where they're already starting to have issues. Now, let's say a cop panics and shoots because this person's coming at him and isn't listening. Unlike what most people who don't know anything about guns do, almost everybody trained with a gun shoots center mass. Unless there's a lucky stray shot to the head, the cop may actually end up mag dumping and then getting bit and killed anyway. Now, what I just went over was 1 hour in one city. Even if every single first batch of zombies is contained, 20 more will die the next hour. And some of the ones that were bit in the first wave will join them. There's 22 hours left in this day. We're only 2 hours in. Now, while this is happening in New York City, an additional 333 people over the entire United States die per hour in roughly the same ratios as the one in New York City. It varies. The ratios I use are specifically for New York City, but they'll be similar elsewhere. During that same hour, an additional 7,178 people will die per hour across the world. This doesn't include wars. Now, what if this only let's say all these outbreaks, so across the entire world you have almost 7,500 reanimations, including the United States. What if only 1% of these results in an uncontained event where a building or a small area of town is completely taken over? Well, that's 3 locations in the United States per hour then. I think it would be far worse. That would be best case scenario. So let's talk guns in general. First, hospitals and long-term care facilities are gun-free zones. Nobody there has guns. Security might, but they probably have very strict usage on requirements on when they can bring them out. Large cities are less likely to have citizens who carry firearms. Big city firearm owners are less likely to be well trained in using a gun. Anyone who actually has firearms training, including the police, are trained to fire center mass. That's all there is to it. People are not trained to shoot in the head. Now, kind of funny, I did a role playing game session, live action, where we did a zombie apocalypse thing. And I actually had all the players role play themselves for the zombie apocalypse. And this was about Outbreak. And the young guys in the group were, we're good with guns, man. We've seen anime and we've watched TV shows. And this one guy, thought he was like pretty good at stuff. And so in game, they found a gun safe, grabbed it, and he wanted the shotgun from the safe because he knew how to use a shotgun. And so I said, okay, well, you're playing yourself, so that means you have to actually have this skill. So I gave him my shotgun and a couple of dummy rounds, safety rounds, snap caps. So I gave him a no frills Mossberg pump shotgun, a handful of safety rounds. After 5 minutes of fumbling around, he still didn't have a round in the chamber. The point is, many people who have never handled a gun think there is nothing to picking one up and just shooting it and hitting your target. It's not that easy. Handguns are actually really hard to hit things with, even at incredibly close range, especially headshots. Now, putting rounds in a magazine Loading a magazine in an unfamiliar gun, using a stripper clip, finding a loading port can take time. Okay, these are people, if they're standing their ground with a zombie coming at them, are going to get bit and or killed. Getting around in the chamber and disengaging the safety all take time unless you're intimately familiar with the gun in your hand. Even if you're really good with guns, if you pick up a gun that's significantly different, you're going to have a slower reaction time between the point where you pick up the gun and chamber around and actually use it. Holding an automatic pistol incorrectly can cause it to cycle wrong and jam on the first shot. Most automatic handguns, because of the way the gas exchange system works and to work the bolt back and forth, essentially, if you limp wrist the gun or hold it incorrectly, it may not cycle properly and it may not eject the round or it may not cycle the next round up and you're done, especially if you don't know how to clear it. And if you've never handled a gun or it's an unfamiliar gun, that's not going to be quick or it's not going to be quick enough. Panic situations cause even the best marksman to miss a target. Most people don't train on moving targets. And again, we emphasize almost nobody trains for headshots. Now, we have to kind of consider the cognitive issues, the facts of what is happening are going to be very hard for everybody to reconcile. It's going to be even harder to get someone who isn't seeing what's going on, if they're just hearing about it over their phone, to understand what it is that you're seeing and what's going on. So, first, you've got some unknown phenomenon is causing people to become violent, and they are trying to attack and bite everyone in sight. No one's going to sit there and say, oh, the dead are rising. No, this is going to uh, confuse people. They might start sending additional police for security at the hospitals. And you never know. One of these hospitals could end up being one of your uncontained events where basically it's being overrun. A handful of cops isn't going to remedy that situation for all the things I just talked about. So the only real solution to the problem of what appear to be violent living people moving around is to kill them. How many hours do you think it's going to take for people to accept this as reality? And how long before it's universally accepted? How do you, as a police officer in the front line, if you finally come around to this conclusion, report up your chain of command to superiors saying, hey, these people we can't be restraining them, we have to kill them? It's going to take long, most likely too long. Severe head trauma is the only way you can kill them. You will die if you get bit. How long is it going to take people to understand this? I again say too long. It's going to take several hours before people realize that this is really a problem. It's going to take even longer before people accept what the problem is and what the solution is. At the point a city has accepted there's a problem, they may have at least one site that's either in the process of being overrun or sealed off no-go sections already where places have been overrun. There may be overrun sites that are unknown to the authorities because they weren't reported or interpreted correctly. If it's determined that this is a disease, they're probably going to initially have to assume that it might be airborne. At that point, first responders might refuse to assist, or the ones who will resist are only going to be limited to the ones who can get medical protective gear on. By the time the situation is beginning to spiral out of control, the city authorities will call in off-duty police officers and request assistance from the state police and sheriff. If this is happening overnight, expect more delays as getting hold of key people and getting them to an office to make decisions is going to be harder. And the flip side, if it's happening during the day, people will be packed together in groups that will make them easier targets for what's going on. So, when it's bad enough, the mayors will be calling on the governor to bring in the National Guard. If you look at what's been going on lately in the news, governors aren't necessarily all that happy about bringing in the National Guard. They look at it as, oh, that's kind of admitting we've done something wrong. We've failed somehow. So, assume the Guard gets called in a reasonable amount of time. Well, if this was an unpredicted emergency, and if there was no other emergencies in progress, the Guard is actually in stand down mode. They're not in any way ready to go. From the point where the Guard is called up until they begin deploying into trouble spots is 18 to 48 hours, depending on the state. And the 18-hour mark is when they're just showing up, not when they're ready to go. So this assumes no other emergency is in progress, i.e., places where they might be already bogged down working on another problem like hurricane recovery or something. By this time, multiple urban centers could be in trouble. The National Guard is typically deployed with soldiers not issued with ammunition. Their typical duties are patrol, safeguard lives, and backfilling non-frontline police positions to allow the police to get more people into the trouble spots. Only the governor can authorize the Guard to lock and load. The governor sets the conditions for when ammunition can be used. Expect most governors to be super cautious and slowly walk into the ammunition carry and use issues. By the time the Guard is on the ground in New York, at least 360 routine deaths have occurred at this point. Throughout the city, their spawn will be increasing, could be in the low thousands at this point. Many of the dead and infected will be police, first responder medical personnel, and hospital workers. The hospitals, assume they aren't actually overrun by zombies, will probably be at capacity. These will be security nightmares requiring the bulk of the police force or a large portion of the National Guard to keep them running. Spontaneous panics will be happening at this point. Some people will use the disorder as an opportunity to loot. Other people will attempt to flee, slowing down the movement of emergency personnel. Each governor will have a wide range of takes on the use of force. Head trauma as the only way to kill them won't be universal information yet. An additional problem comes up in that Washington, D.C. and most state capitals will be experiencing the same problems as New York City. There's going to be insufficient National Guard to assist in every major city of each state. Governors will have the choice of serving all cities poorly or trying to prioritize cities that they think that can be saved. It's highly likely that some state governments and portions of the federal government will be forced to relocate due to being in no-go zones, making coordination even more difficult. By the time the government calls in the military, the Guard will either be in the process of being overrun or will be stuck contained in areas they can control. They will no longer be ranging around controlling the cities. The military is going to have its own problems at this point. 13% of the US military is overseas at any given time. At any given time, 8 to 10% of the military is on vacation. Expect leaves to be canceled, but by the point that happens, travel is going to start to become difficult. Only 38% of the military lives on base. The remainder lives off base with their families. So, depending on when the military performs their recalls, they're likely to be short staffed. People on leave may not be able to return. Off base soldiers may already be dead or in places too dangerous to travel from. Bases in or near urban centers may already be having security problems. Snarled roadways may cause people to arrive late or not at all. If accommodations aren't made for off base families, soldiers may ignore recalls to stay home to protect their families, or some on base may desert to go home. Many tanks, helicopters, and other machinery don't merely depend on military mechanics. Many also need contractors. In some locations, critical shortages will occur where maintenance on air and ground vehicles will cause a lot of the equipment to come to a halt, basically keep people being missing. Once deployment orders are made, comes the very difficult task of engagement orders. Where do you deploy? How do you deploy the military concentrated or do you scatter it to other locations? At what point will the use of heavy ordnance be authorized? What collateral damage is acceptable on American soil? Can you risk bombing a horde walking through a subdivision when there may be families still sheltering in place? Secondly, as Max Brooks did such a great job pointing out in his book World War Z, which is infinitely better than the really horrible movie that bears the same name, many of our heavy weapons won't have the spectacular results people envision them having on a group of zombies. Most explosives might kill a zombie on a direct hit or a near miss. However, the blast radius that will normally kill or injure a human will merely knock a zombie off their feet and then they'll just get back up again. Most people in the United States keep inadequate food and other supplies on hand. Urban food stores have minimal backroom storage and are still relying on just-in-time delivery. A lack of food and medicine will drive people out of their shelters early. Authorities are going to rapidly have issues trying to feed the populations they've decided to protect or relocate. Many people will be stranded with inadequate protection and supplies. So, put it mildly, if something like this happened, I would think a slow-moving zombie plague would topple civilization fairly rapidly. You'd run into problems where you'd be losing electricity a lot faster than you might imagine. Even though the plants might keep operating, you're going to have issues with vehicles striking poles, squirrels jumping into transformers, and other things like that. Or the workers just aren't going to be able to get out to, or the workers are going to cease to exist and not be able to get out there. So there's going to be spot outages going on almost immediately. Uh, yeah, it would be a mess. So what can you take from this? Well, one thing is if you think you can just pick up a firearm that you've never fired before and be useful with it, even against a human target, I would say you're sadly mistaken. You have to train with your gun, even if all you're doing is, and I recommend this, getting they're called snap caps or safety bullets. They're little plastic bullets. Very clearly, they're not real with a spring in them that you can actually uh, fire the gun and the pin will strike them without damaging anything. I'd highly recommend getting these for any gun you might have, and at least once a month. Just do loading and firing drills with them just to make sure you can actually do this if you need to. And if you don't have a gun and think you're going to be picking up somebody else's, you might want to think twice on that. Um, have more food at home than you normally have. Always. Just take a little time and just spend just a teeny amount each month building up a stockpile and then rotate that stockpile out. You'll get things you'd normally eat, not necessarily, you don't have to go buy some expensive survival rations. Uh, don't count on the government to make all the right decisions at the right time. They can panic, they can get paralysis, they can do things that are stupid. They can pridefully decide not to ask for help when they should have a long time ago. All right, and not too. I don't think I'll be talking a whole lot more on something like this unless somebody comes up with a real interesting point in the discussion I'm in elsewhere. So be back to mostly politics and history and economics like usual. All right. Thank you for spending time with me this evening. Hope to see you again in a future video. Uh, check out the comments. If you have anything you want to throw in there, do so. Please hit the like button. If the YouTube algorithm brought you here and you're not a regular subscriber, check out my titles. You'll probably want to subscribe because I get into all kinds of stuff. This is probably one of the more oddball ones. Just out of my normal topics. And if you know someone who might find this interesting, please share it with them. All right, you have a good one. We'll talk to you soon.